Monster Guys present a Yokai podcast presentation, bringing to life, through short stories and informative discussion, the strange, the beautiful, the whimsical, and the mystery of Japanese yokai.
Now please enjoy a story about
the Jikininki, in a story titled Jikininki from the book Kwaidan, Japanese Ghost Stories by Lafcadio Hearn, narrated by C. Michael McGannon, presented by the Monster Guys.
Once, when Muso Kakushi, a priest of the Zen sect, was journeying along through the province of Mino, he lost his way in a mountain district where there was nobody to direct him. For a long time he wandered about helplessly, and he was beginning to despair of finding shelter for the night, when he perceived on the top of a hill, lighted by the last rays of the sun, one of those little hermitages called anjitsu, which are built for solitary priests. It seemed to be in ruinous condition, but he hastened to it eagerly, and found that it was inhabited by an aged priest, from whom he begged the favor of a night's lodging. This the old man harshly refused, but he directed Muso to a certain hamlet in the valley adjoining where lodging and food could be obtained. Muso found his way to the hamlet, which consisted of less than a dozen farm cottages, and he was kindly received at the dwelling of the head man. 40 or 50 persons were assembled in the principal apartment at the moment of Muso's arrival. But he was shown to a small separate room, where he was promptly supplied with food and bedding. Being very tired, he lay down to rest at an early hour, but a little before midnight he was roused from sleep by the sound of loud weeping in the next apartment. Presently the sliding screens were gently pushed aside, and a young man, carrying a lighted lantern, entered the room respectfully, saluted him, and said, "Reverend Sir, it is my painful duty to tell you that I am now the responsible head of the house. Yesterday I was only the eldest son, but when you came here, tired as you were, we did not wish that you should feel embarrassed in any way. Therefore we did not tell you that father had died only a few hours before. The people whom you saw in the next room are inhabitants of this village. They all assembled here to pay their last respects to the dead. And now they are going to another village about 3 miles off. For, by our custom, no one of us may remain here in this village during the night after a death has taken place. We make the proper offerings and prayers, then we go away, leaving the corpse alone. Strange things always happen in the house where a corpse has thus been left, so we think that it will be better for you to come away with us. We can find you good lodging in the other village. But perhaps, as you are a priest, you have no fear of demons or evil spirits, and if you are not afraid of being left alone with the body, you will be very welcome to the use of this poor house. However, I must tell you that nobody, except a priest, would dare to remain here tonight." Muso made the answer, "For your kind intention and your generous hospitality, I am deeply grateful. But I am sorry that you did not tell me of your father's death when I came. For, though I was a little tired, I certainly was not so tired that I should have found difficulty in doing my duty as a priest. Had you told me, I could have performed the service before your departure. As it is, I shall perform the service after you have gone away, and I shall stay by the body until morning. I do not know what you mean by your words about the danger of staying here alone, but I am not afraid of ghosts or demons. Therefore please feel no anxiety on my account." The young man appeared to be rejoiced by these assurances, and expressed his gratitude in fitting words. Then the other members of the family, and the folk assembled in the adjoining room, having been told of the priest's kind promises, came to thank him, after which the master of the house said, "Now, Reverend Sir, much as we regret to leave you alone, we must bid you farewell. By the rule of our village, none of us can stay here after midnight. We beg, kind sir, that you will take every care of your honorable body, while we are unable to attend upon you. And if you happen to hear or see anything strange during our absence, please tell us of the matter when we return in the morning." All then left the house except the priest, who went to the room where the dead body was lying. The usual offerings had been set before the corpse, and a small Buddhist lamp, Tamio, was burning. The priest recited the service, and performed the funeral ceremonies, after which he entered into meditation. So meditating he remained through several silent hours, and there was no sound in the deserted village. But when the hush of the night was at its deepest, there noiselessly appeared a shape, vague and vast, and in the same moment Muso found himself without power to move or speak. He saw that shape lift the corpse, as with hands, to devour it, more quickly than a cat devours a rat, beginning at the head and eating everything, the hair and the bones and even the shroud. And the monstrous thing, having thus consumed the body, turned to the offerings and ate them also. Then it went away as mysteriously as it had come. When the villagers returned the next morning, they found the priest awaiting them at the door of the headman's dwelling. All in turn saluted him, and when they had entered and looked about, no one expressed any surprise at the disappearance of the dead body and the offerings. But the master of the house said to Muso, "Reverend sir, you have probably seen unpleasant things during the night. All of us were anxious about you, but now we are very happy to find you alive and unharmed. Gladly we would have stayed with you, if it had been possible. But the law of our village, as I told you last evening, obliges us to quit our houses after death has taken place, and to leave the corpse alone. Whenever this law has been broken, heretofore some great misfortune has followed. Whenever it is obeyed, we find that the corpse and the offerings disappear during our absence. Perhaps you have seen the cause." Then Muso told of the dim and awful shape that had entered the death chamber to devour the body and the offerings. No person seemed to be surprised by his narration, and the master of the house observed, "What you have told us, reverend sir, agrees with what has been said about this matter from ancient time." Muso then inquired, "Does not the priest on the hill sometimes perform the funeral service for your dead?" "What priest?" the young man asked. "The priest who yesterday evening directed me to this village," answered Muso. "I called at his anjitsu on the hill yonder. He refused me lodging, but told me the way here." The listeners looked at each other, as in astonishment, and after a moment of silence, the master of the house said, "Reverend sir, there is no priest, and there is no anjitsu on the hill. For the time of many generations there has not been any resident priest in this neighborhood." Muso said nothing more on the subject, for it was evident that his kind hosts supposed him to have been deluded by some goblin. But after having bidden them farewell, and obtained all necessary information as to his road, he determined to look again for the hermitage on the hill, and to so ascertain whether he had really been deceived. He found the anjitsu without any difficulty, and, this time, its aged occupant invited him to enter. When he had done so, the hermit humbly bowed down before him, exclaiming, "Ah, I am ashamed. I am very much ashamed. I am exceedingly ashamed." "You need be ashamed for having refused me shelter," said Muso. "You directed me to the village yonder, where I was very kindly treated, and I thank you for that favor." "I can give no man shelter," the recluse made answer, "and it is not for the refusal that I am ashamed. I am ashamed only that you should have seen me in my real shape, for it is I who devoured the corpse and the offerings last night before your eyes. Know, reverend sir, that I am a Jikininki, an eater of human flesh. Have pity upon me, and suffer me to confess the secret fault by which I became reduced to this condition. A long, long time ago, I was a priest in this desolate region. There was no other priest for many leagues around, so in that time the bodies of the mountain folk who died used to be brought here, sometimes from great distances, in order that I might repeat over them the holy service. But I repeated the service and performed the rites only as a matter of business. I thought only of the food and the clothes that my sacred profession enabled me to gain. And because of this selfish impiety, I was reborn immediately after my death into the state of a Jikininki. Since then, I have been obliged to feed upon the corpses of the people who die in this district. Every one of them I must devour in the way that you saw last night. Now, reverend sir, let me beseech you to perform a Sagaki service for me. Help me by your prayers, I entreat you, so that I may be soon able to escape from this horrible state of existence." No sooner had the hermit uttered his petition than he disappeared, and the hermitage also disappeared at that same instant, and Muso Kokushi found himself kneeling alone in the high grass, beside an ancient and moss-grown tomb of the form called Go-Rin Ishi, which seemed to be the tomb of a priest.
The Jikininki A hungry ghost.
Yes, a preta, or a gaki if you're in Japan. Those words probably mean nothing without some clarification. This is actually a hungry ghost, and its origin is from India. The preta were different types of hungry spirits that were cursed to live very repugnant afterlives here on Earth. They were cursed to eat human cadavers or feces or other embarrassing and very humiliating materials.
I was going to say, a humiliating afterlife altogether.
Yeah, so just as in the story, they do not like to be around people. They can disguise themselves as regular human beings and live out a fairly ordinary life without that, or with that disguise. But they do not like their existence at all. They're very conscious of it and very ashamed to be in that state.
And a very scary vision for someone to see as well.
Yes. They are basically zombies in appearance. They're spirits, yes, but their bodies are rotting flesh, glowing eyes, long, sharp claws, the whole 9 yards.
And they share a lot of similarities to the hopping vampires.
Yes, the Jiangshi. But the difference is this. The Jiangshi are not necessarily mindless, but I would consider them more of the mindless creature that just goes after the flesh. They can be intelligent, but they're not regretful per se. They don't show a lot of remorse like the Jikininki does. They are similar, though, in origin. Both creatures are born from a soul that is corrupted or greedy or selfish or gluttonous at times. Actually, when we were doing research for this one, I had kind of forgotten that they were two separate creatures. I was thinking that they were basically the same.
Because of so many similarities that they share.
Yes.
So I guess the lesson here is don't be a greedy person in this life.
Yep. Or you'll turn into these guys. Or you might even turn into the Rakshasa, which was also an older origin for the Jikininki, or an older translation for this creature.
This story comes from Lafcadio Hearn's book, Kwaidan, Japanese Ghost Stories.
Yes.
And it, as in keeping with many Japanese stories, has a very abrupt ending. Talk to us a little bit about the story itself and about the ending.
Well, I remember the first time I read the story, I was, in that typical Japanese way, I was at the end just kind of wondering what happens next. But it's kind of clear. I had to go back and read it a couple times to understand exactly what happened. You get the sense that he's asking the priest to, perform a holy ritual over him and free his spirit, so to speak, which I'm assuming Muso does after the end of the story. You kind of see that question, and then the spirit vanishes and shows the priest his tomb, or where his body is supposedly buried. So I think after that, and in some other older, or not older translations, but more recent translations, you see Muso actually carry out that service. And it's kind of cool. I don't have the book here with me, but Lafcadio Hearn actually left in his footnotes in his book notes on how that particular service is carried out.
And this book that we're reading from actually was a recent gift to me by some friends because they knew that we loved Japanese ghost stories. So we felt like we wanted to share a story from this book. Certainly an important author in an important collection of stories where Japanese folktales are concerned.
Yes, very much so. This is actually a book that I read as a teenager in Disney, actually. One of the parks in Orlando, Florida, actually had a copy of this book, one of their little shops. And I remember pouring through it at the time and reading through as much as I could that day. Ever since then, I've held this book. I mean, this book has held a special place in my heart. It's basically the Western version of Grimm's fairy tales for Japanese folklore, if you will.
That's very cool. And this particular edition that we have is just full of some stunning artwork and layout. So very excited to get to read a story from this edition and from this gift that was given to us.
Very much so. We might talk more about the hopping vampire this month as our theme.
Yeah,
I don't know if we've announced our theme yet. But
I don't think so, but if not, then tomorrow it begins, being the last day of the month. This next month, the Monster Guys podcast, our main podcast, begins with the theme of the undead. So certainly would fit within that theme in our story time as well.
Very much so. So I'm looking forward to digging deeper into his cousin, the Jiangshi, as well this month if we get to it. But that should be a lot of fun, and perhaps a bit more on the spooky, scary side.
Yeah. So the Jikininki, ladies and gentlemen, a scary looking...
A very
sad story indeed. We hope you've enjoyed the story this week, and as always, you can find us at themonsterguys.com or on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Just look us up at The Monster Guys. Subscribe to us on iTunes. Very soon, our story podcasts will be separated out from our main The Monster Guys podcast feed, and they'll have their own homes to subscribe to and to follow there. But for now, thank you for listening, and thank you for subscribing, and we look forward to hearing from you, and look forward to a very special guest on the Monster Guys podcast this week coming up in just a couple of days. Thanks again. Good night.
Good night.